people want to try to adopt new technologies, there's this match of like, if we can just apply that technology in the right way, the enthusiasm is waiting. People are waiting for a solution. The market is waiting for you. And I think for an entrepreneur, that's really exciting.
Well, Matt, thank you for joining us today. Talk to us a little about Pasture Biosciences.
Sure. So people often know that cows will have some impact on the climate, but they're not sure how or why. And so cows, as part of their natural digestion, generate methane in their rumen, which is their gut. They then excrete this methane. People often think it's through farting. It's actually through burping.
Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we can clear that up in this show. It's burps, not farts.
Burps, not farts, yes. It's the biggest clarification I have to give. What I'm doing. Methane that they produce is a substantial contributor to climate change. It's actually one of the biggest sources of man-made methane in the atmosphere is from cows. And methane, compared to other greenhouse gases like CO2, which it's a lot more coverage, actually captures a lot more heat in the atmosphere. Cows are one of the biggest drivers of the growing amount of methane in the atmosphere.
And just to get a sense of the scale of the problem, how many cattle are there in the world right now?
In the world, close to 1 billion animals.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cows naturally emit methane through burps in their digestive tract. Mm-hmm. How do you go tackle that problem?
Providing them with some kind of chemical. There's different compounds you can use that augments the fermentation process in their gut, so they produce less methane. And that could mean giving less of the chemicals that are the input to the microbes that make methane to try to cut that out. It could be actually interrupting the metabolism of the microbes that make methane. There's kind of different tactics, but fundamentally it's inserting something into the animal. This can be very useful and sounds awesome. But if you've ever been on a ranch, you know that all of these processes require constant administration because cows are eating all the time, right? And so this means that I'm now putting something in front of the cow to eat all the time, which can work in some circumstances, but there are a lot of times where the cows are just out far away grazing, right? So it doesn't quite work. So our approach is to use the cow's own immune system, to teach the cow's immune system that some of these microbes that make this methane are problematic. Have the cow's own body try to fight those microbes and reduce their number to reduce the amount of methane the animal's producing.
And how did you come onto this problem?
Spending time understanding the other approaches that were being taken and seeing how much enthusiasm there is to try to adopt new technologies, then also having this concern of but I don't actually think this approach is actually that scalable. And understanding that I think that there's a viable approach here with this technology that we're exploring. There's this match of if we can just apply that technology in the right way, the enthusiasm is waiting. People are waiting for a solution.
What gives you confidence or at least an inkling that the solution is tractable?
COVID was terrible for so many reasons, but one of the main silver linings is that we got pretty good at making vaccines and making vaccines quickly and developed a lot of really awesome toolkits for building vaccines. Just in the last few years, there's been a whole class of scientists who have come into their professional careers who work on vaccine products and have worked on vaccine products using very new technologies. Really excited to take these people who have this training, who have this enthusiasm, and now apply it to a new problem.
Got it. Definitely some market demand. So this signals that if you build it, they will buy it. The technological underpinnings which make this approach possible in a way that it wasn't possible even 3 years ago.
Totally.
And then, other approaches to the same problem, which are interesting and might be useful, but just are hard to scale in a way that this one isn't. So it kind of can be done, there is demand, and if it happens, it will scale. Is that's sort of it?
Those are the ingredients, yeah, totally. And that's, I think, what creates the enthusiasm.
And you have some personal connections to this problem as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my family was initially in dairy and then eventually in cattle for several generations. I'm the first generation not to ranch. It was really important to my parents that me and my siblings go to college. So it's really funny to them that I'm now working with cows again. They think that's just so wild.
And so how do you think about that in terms of the customer story? Because you know this firsthand. These are hardworking people that have a lot of things to manage. And here you are introducing them to something new. How do you get them to spend time on this?
They're really hardworking and they're also just super busy. And so you have to take their time very seriously. And if you're going to approach them with something, you have to really have a clear value prop to them. The adoption more straightforward to them. The adoptions should be easy. Everything for them should be easy. You want this to be this should be the easiest decision they make in a day if we present our data in the right way. And it's also leveraging other experts who they work with. Ranchers don't make decisions on their own. They work with veterinarians or nutritionists to kind of manage the lifespan of their animals. And so you want to have all those stakeholders involved.
But just to put a very fine point on it, the pitch to them is going to be a massive benefit to them and there's a co-benefit of environmental impact. But the primary reason they're going to want to adopt this is something that's going to affect how, their bottom line or how they operate their ranch.
For us, if we don't connect our product to their bottom line, we won't have a viable product. Not that these ranchers don't care about the environment. Like in many ways, ranchers and like people who work in agriculture are like more finely attuned to the changes in the environment than anyone else, right? It impacts their business more than anyone else. So they deeply care about the environment, but their businesses also have very low margins. So that means if you are going to introduce something to them, it has to work for their business. Otherwise, you don't have a business.
So as a second-time founder, what are the things that you're like, I get to do this differently this time? Or like, I'm going to do it exactly as I did last time because that was great.
The things that will be different is, I'm going to this with like a laser focus. We're building a thing. The thing needs to work as soon as possible, scale as soon as possible. That mission is very clear. When I'm interviewing people to join the company, like, if they're not interested in this exact mission, they're not a good fit. We're not going to do 5 other things. We're not going to have a sub-team that might do, some other problem later. It's like, this is the thing we want to solve, and we're here to solve a problem. We're not here to like build like, a company that might have like 19 other divisions. The focus now is to solve this problem.
Was this a lesson from your first startup?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
When you have multiple focuses.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find balance. It's hard to prioritize. It's hard for the team to understand what the priorities are. They're not kind of sure how they should make decisions. And I also feel like you tell a worse story. I think a huge part of being a founder, building a company, especially in the early days, is just telling a story. And when the story has multiple kind of chapters to it, no one has time to listen to it. It's hard to follow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One mistake I've seen people make is they sometimes think prioritization is like not doing bad work, but prioritization is actually not doing known good work for higher leverage work, right? That's when you're really making laser focused decisions. Like, I know this would be good and fun and a bunch of other things, but like, instead, I'm going to work on this other thing because it is higher leverage.
Totally. Like most competent people know to identify things that are a waste of time.
Yeah,
that's
not the hard part.
That's not the hard part. Yeah, totally. I'll identify the waste. Yeah, exactly. It's choosing the best thing.
What about in terms of hiring? You have a scientific background. Talk to us a little bit about your background.
I have dropped out of grad school twice, so I'm half a scientist 2 ways. And yeah, so that means that I think I understand enough of what the scientific like journey is like for people that we're hiring. I think about these folks as people who have a ton of skills that they want to offer the world. Like they just spent a number of years painstakingly like honing a set of skills, and they want to go out and like make use of them.
I think many scientists get into that line of work out of, a deep intellectual curiosity. Starting a small company, as you said, is about laser focus. I've got to ship this product on this time at this, nothing else matters, basically. As you're interviewing scientists, how are you trying to figure out who could make that leap into this like laser-focused startup world?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest initial sortings of scientists. Are they someone who wants to just continue to do breadth-first exploration? There's a second phenotype, people who like have a craving for going deep, have a craving for like tinkering on one problem, making something work, and who actually might be really interested in finding one of those problems if they feel like there's a business alignment. And so you want to find that second cohort of people who are down to be focused and do focused work.
How do you sort the two?
I ask out like what they liked about grad school, or I ask like what they liked about their last company. And people who like breadth first exploration, they're going to tell you things like, I like being creative. I like following questions. I like being very multidisciplinary and exploring different disciplines and bringing them together. Like these can be good things, but the other folks will tell you like, I like solving things. I like building things. It's almost more like engineering science. 2 groups that emerge: people who want to build things, people who want to just explore things.
What does fundraising look like?
In the early days, you're meeting people and you're refining your story. I tell my friends who are pitching right now, talk to as many people as you can. Yeah. Just ask them for advice, feedback on your story. They don't ask them for money, because in the early days, your story isn't going to be good enough for money. Like no one's going to want to give you money. So just get feedback on the story you're telling, and if it resonates with them, and iterate on it as much as you can. And then the story is compelling enough that we don't need a visual aid. Like the visual aid is for someone to read beforehand. Then you meet the VCs who might actually want to invest. My core learning was the best way to raise money is to find an early champion, because that creates so much more confidence in every following conversation. Figure out who your champion's going to be, and then to like work with them to build the rest of the syndicate.
And what was that like, that moment where you figured out that Evelyn on our team, we're a startup too, so one of our co-founders, became your champion? It's
a very like intimate relationship, and like a really like trust fall, because from that moment, Evelyn went on and she made a bunch of calls on my behalf, right? She told the story became her story to tell. So it's making sure this person like understands what you're trying to achieve, and can kind of be a voice for it. It was a gamble. I knew that going in, but my thinking was 2 things. One was that it's a small fund, which means that like there would be a lot more attention potentially. I actually get access to all the partners, which is pretty amazing. And the second thing was that like you were an operator. When we had our meeting here, like you pointed out something like in like the first 10 minutes of our pitch, and it was totally correct.
So I'm curious, people have lots of opinions on lots of things, but particularly when you're starting a company. Take us through, any bad advice you've gotten, maybe in your first company or in this company that you like sounded good at the time, but you realized it was well-intentioned but wasn't helpful?
My first company, some of the advice I got was that like you should think about investors as it's like cash is cash. Just like find cash at the cheapest price. With my last startup, we really didn't engage very much with our investors. Like it was just kind of like a cash exchange. And this has been a lot different. It's been a lot more hands-on. And I actually think that it's been really valuable for me to have to kind of leverage that support. There is a community there to draw on. And I didn't do that with my last startup. And I feel like it was a missed opportunity. So I'm glad I'm doing it now. For climate, the story you tell is different when you're hiring or fundraising. It feels less competitive within the climate space.
Yeah.
I feel so much less cagey about what I'm working on or like the progress I'm making. Like I want to collaborate with other people who are working in the space. If someone else builds an equally amazing product, I still feel good about that because like ultimately we're all kind of racing towards the same thing.
This is a common theme I've heard in experience, which is like in climate, people are a bit more collaborative. It's sort of like planet first, my company second. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
all right.
I feel like I'm on a TV show.